Welcome to Cyber Safe with AJ. I'm your host, Allison Cutts, and today we're exploring a powerful question. What does true cyber collaboration look like? And are we doing enough as a community to protect each other? I'm joined today by Barrie Drum, co-founder of Streaming Defense. Barrie and I met over 2 years ago while volunteering for buildingcybersecurity.org, a nonprofit focused on protecting next generation buildings and critical infrastructure. That experience showed us how much collaboration matters and how often it doesn't happen. And that's exactly what today's episode is about. We'll dive into how ISACs, called Information Sharing and Analysis Centers, first began, why some organizations still choose not to join them, and how Streaming Defense is reimagining the future of collective cyber defense. Because cyber threats don't work alone, why should we? Today's guest, Barrie Drum, is a certified fraud examiner with over 20 years experience in forensic accounting, cyber investigations, and white-collar crimes. She has worked with agencies such as the FBI, IRS, U.S. Customs, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, helping uncover and prosecute financial fraud. She also helped develop national forensic standards at the Big Four accounting firms and previously spent a decade in banking as a commercial lender and head of credit. Today, she is co-founder of Streaming Defense, focusing fully on cybersecurity and collective defense strategies. Barrie, with your unique background across fraud, finance, and cybersecurity, you've seen the threat landscape evolve from many angles. So let's start simple. When did you realize that collaboration was the next frontier, and how does ISACs fit into that? Why do they matter now more than ever?
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, this is near and dear to my heart. I've been working with ISACs for quite a while. And for those out there with more information on what an ISAC is, it's an information sharing and analysis center. And they're sector-based organizations that facilitate sharing of cyber threat and operational risk. Basically, they were started to protect the critical infrastructure. Coordinated intelligence exchanges, there is a trusted environment with members engaging to promote best practices and coordinated response to various situations. And as everyone knows, with the rapid pace of threat evolution right now, with attacks from nation states and crime organizations and AI-driven attacks, deep fakes and ransomware attacks, it's becoming more and more important to really have a collective defense with members of a community so they can enforce and share thoughts, share information, and just become a real force to be reckoned with. And not only from a membership standpoint, but it would help to reduce individual risk by sharing information.
Barrie, when we talk about information sharing and collaboration, it's not just what we share, it's how we share it safely. One framework that comes up often in ISACs that you've mentioned to me in the past is the TLP, known as Traffic Light Protocol. Can you walk listeners through what a TLP is, why it exists, and how it helps organizations share information without putting themselves at risk?
So what that does is it dictates the framework as to how the information is disseminated back to the ISAC members. So information can be read, which is restricted use and should not be shared outside the original recipients within that community due to the high risk of the information. Okay. Then you have AMBER. And that information can be shared with staff within the organization and with service providers who have a contractual obligation to protect it, but not externally. So you have an external protection layer. So it's just specific to the membership at various degrees. Now, TLP Green gets a little bit more informal, if you will. It's information that can be shared with peers and partners within a broader community or sector, but not on publicly accessible channels. And then you have TLP White, which is really the easiest to share because there are really not restrictions at that level. The information carries minimal or no risk and may be distributed without any kind of restrictions, but subject to copyright infringement and so forth. So that's basically the guidance within the ISAC as to how information is shared.
What would be really helpful, because ISACs is new for me, but even though I've been in the technology sector since 1996 and evolving more over the last 4 to 5
Right.
years in cybersecurity, what does that mean to what members may have seen historically in the past versus the benefit of having almost like a traffic cop directing the right information to the right individual?
Well, for one thing, it's an access to timely threat intel with the guidance, and it adds to improved situational awareness and early warnings for the whole membership. You have the ability to exchange with peers, which if you were not in ISAC, that'd be a little bit more difficult because you have the membership set out for you, and you can bond and form side relationships as well, that you may have someone you can call if something perhaps occurs that you don't want to share necessarily with the whole group.
Yeah.
There's collaboration and coordination. The ISACs also offer training, desktop exercises, and best practices resources. As I said, stronger relationships between public and private sectors are also forged throughout this process. So you just meet more and more people, and it just once again adds to the collective defense nature. And two, the information is anonymized, so it doesn't necessarily come back to an individual member, right? The SOC itself within the ISAC really dictates as to how the information is shared back, as I discussed with the traffic call. However, that actually adds the dimension that it doesn't go back to the individual member because it's going through the ISAC itself. And the ISAC is governed by a board of directors scenario, and the members form the board of directors. So you have that level as well as the ISAC itself, which is a nonprofit and has its own SOC, analysts and so forth that can help with the whole ISAC concept.
Okay. And then, so what would probably be really helpful in that ISACs being new to me, meaning information sharing and analysis centers, what would be really helpful for the audience is to understand the history and evolution of the ISACs, because I think a lot of times we use acronyms in our industry and don't really know where they came from or why. Would you mind sharing just some background on the history of when they started and the evolution and the benefits of them?
Sure.
Or whether it's other organizations, small or large?
Sure. It's kind of interesting because I say it's fairly new, but really fairly new. It's 25 years now that they've been in the making. And ISAC started back in 1998, 99 timeframe, and it was Presidential Decision Directive 63 that called for sector-based information sharing entities. And it was all about, at that point in time, the critical infrastructure, which was needed to be protected in some form. The first ISAC, which is given credit to be the first ISAC, is a financial services ISAC. There are thousands of members in the financial service ISAC today. It started with a handful, but greatly expanded. It became the model for other ISACs to follow suit. Membership driven, once again, paying a fee, and it was supported by the federal government. Now, you had more and more ISACs, critical infrastructure-wise, that started coming into fray. For example, you had telecommunications, electricity, that started to come forward in the year 2000, 2003. Then after 9/11, things really hit the ground with the ISAC formations. You had the establishment of the Department of Homeland Security in 2002, which really brought the ISACs into a coordinated federal framework under the National Infrastructure Protection Plan. Then you had more and more ISACs being formed, such as for water, information technology, surface transportation, emergency services, public transit. And this started evolving over 2004 to 2010. In 2011, you had some communities which were more niche communities, such as the health ISAC, the automotive ISAC coming into the picture. Then, as far as the critical infrastructure is concerned, you had other folks. So in 2015, something new came into the picture because you had all these other communities that really wanted to get into the game with sharing, but they really weren't part of the critical infrastructure, if you will. They're important nonetheless, but they were not part of the critical infrastructure. 15, the ISAC model was basically two-section bound. It was too limited for cross-industry organizations, and it excluded small and non-critical entities. Therefore, Executive Order 13691 really encouraged the creation of the information sharing and analysis organizations which are ISACs, a little bit different than ISAC. And this required that there are really no requirements to be tied to critical infrastructure, segment-wise, more flexibility for membership models, and more specialization, such as the legal services ISAC. There's a maritime logistics. And the standards framework were developed by DHS to fund these ISACs. So you have more government involvement too.
So if I were to look at the early stages, medium stages, and now we're kind of at a stage of more maturity, if it's upwards of 20 to 25 years, like what did information look like in the early days? Was it emails and lists, or
It
like
was,
what does
right.
it look like from the beginning, and kind of where is it today?
It was emails. Well, by and large, there are different platforms within the ISACs to communicate the information back to the members, but they're basically based on portals, right? So, and emails was the big thing way back when too. A lot of the information that was disseminated was stale, wasn't up to date. It was based on threat information they were getting from various sources, but it was not something that was real time.
Stale.
Right. Actionable to access late to the game, as far as that's concerned.
So when I think of like email or lists, most of the people joining into these organizations were more reactive versus proactive, where right now the technology is far more advanced and more ready to help organizations, whether you're joining an ISAC or an ISAL, where you can get information real time is what it sounds like. So it looks like we've evolved from reactive to a more proactive state. Would that be correct?
That's correct. But let me just hint on those, some of the more reasons too why there's still folks that are resistant in joining ISACs.
Okay.
And then after that, I'll get into what we're envisioning as far as stream dispense is concerned with the next gen ISAC concept, which is going to lead to more robust information sharing in true real time. It's something that's out. But you still have a lot of organizations that are very resistant in joining an ISAC.
Okay.
This can be high in some of the organizations. And that could be prohibitive, especially with small and medium-sized organizations that may not have resources to spend.
So that makes me think of, why don't people join? What are the common reasons, whether it's large organizations or even small, medium?
Right. Well, it's just it's just a trust element, right? And the privacy element, and just things like legal concerns. Like, if I share something, is it going to go back to haunt me? Is it going to be pinpointed back to my organization? And of course, you have legal counsel, general counsels that may be resistant to having an organization participate in something like that as well. You have some compliance issues that are obviously on the minds of folks. There's data fatigue. Okay, if I'm getting information from these ISACs, what do I do with it? Do I have my own SOC? Do I have my own resources to take action upon this if I have knowledge that these threats are out there? Right. So basically, the lack of the ability to respond. So what am I getting out of an ISAC if I can't do something like that? Like, where is the value for me? Because you're also taking into consideration the cost element. But trust and sensitivity is extremely important, and it has inhibited exchange throughout the history of ISACs. Many ISAC will tell you that that's probably the most important thing that they have from consideration standpoint is, why aren't my members sharing information? So not even participation, because some of the larger organizations may be able to share more information because they have the resources, right? The technology in place to discover a lot of these threats, but the small organizations do not.
So they don't know what they have that trust barrier.
That's right.
And it's like they don't have those resources like you just mentioned, and they don't know what's out there yet because it was a manual process, not manual, but it was a slower to respond process. And like you said, data fatigue. If you're a small organization with limited resources, like I always say, it's like too much noise. Like you don't know what's relevant or not, like you mentioned earlier.
Right. And two, I mean, also you have ISACs and ISACs, but you also have all these other communities, shared communities that are popping up that may be in competition with some of these ISACs and ISALs, which is kind of added a different dimension. And of course, there is the issue too of cross-sector cooperation. Is there any kind of real-time coordination? Now, you have the National Center for ISACs that's trying to do some of that, but there are still barriers to that. And of course, you have the TLP, the Traffic Light Protocol, that's adding to that within communities to what they truly want to share. And then you have the limits because, if you remember, ISACs and ISALs are nonprofits, so their funding sources are limited. They have a lot of conferences and so forth where they may get sponsorship from vendors and so forth that may help them with some of the financial burden, but you're relying mostly on members for the membership fee and you may perhaps get grants. But there are some barriers as far as technically what can be done within some of these ISACs, especially the smaller ones. And you also obviously want for these ISACs to have top of the line analysts to be able to take the data and to put that back out to the membership. And unfortunately, from a competitive standpoint, they can't pay as much either as big companies can for this talent. So attracting talent has been another issue with ISACs. But I guess the bottom line for ISACs is you have to show value to members, right? To be able to keep them functioning, right? And keep them going and get members interested. So that's the challenge at this point in time. Therefore, entering defense and what we're doing and offering up with the next generation ISAC.
Tell me a little bit more about that, because I believe we're talking about being able to take a lot of information and make it actionable, not just reports. So what is streaming defense doing differently to help, the ISACs, ISALs, and even all the organizations that may participate, whether they're small, medium, or large?
Well, we've been working with Global Resilience Federation for a couple of years now and trying to get this concept integrated into some of the communities. Right now, we're also working with the mining ISAC, for example, and they are actually putting the next gen ISAC concept into play right now as we speak with getting members integrated into this particular framework. We like to call this living intelligence because we're actually providing actionable intelligence in true real time, milliseconds, where we're delivering threats that can be disseminated back out through the ISAC. And from an integration standpoint as to what it looks like, as we're actually asking the members to put probes, and they can be virtual or they can be physical, in front of their network on the public side. So it's not as if we're coming into their organization at this standpoint.
Yep, you're saying outside the firewall is what you're basically outside their network.
That's right. And what happens is the SOC itself at the ISAC will be ingesting the information that's coming off of the probes in real time from the various members. And then they will decide what to share back in real time and perhaps in milliseconds back to the members, so they can see information that is actionable at that point in time and is really giving them something that's not stale and outdated, but something that's happening now, which is a true benefit for not only the ISACs themselves, but for the individual members, because it's really promoting something new and more robust as far as information sharing is concerned.
And what I really like about this evolving over time in streaming defense and your technology is you're now making it broader for all different size organizations, regardless of their resource level, but also building a community, because as we all know, the more communities we build and share information, it becomes live data, like you said, but actionable versus simulation. People assuming, I know this, I think, let me go ask somebody else. Now it's taking real-time data in milliseconds and allowing all different size organizations receive that benefit by being part of the ISAC or ISAL.
And it may be that the larger organizations may be sharing more, right? Because of the technology they have, they're able to do that with what's coming off their network. But to your point, it does allow the smaller and medium-sized companies to benefit from that actionable intelligence. And then they can figure out within their own environment how they can best remedy the situation. And not only do we look at instantaneously what's going on, but we afford the ISAC the ability to do a look back for 30 days to see if the IOCs were predominant at any of the networks for the members. So they could also disseminate that information back to the individual members, which is an interesting component of this. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
It gets to be pretty technical. With your permission, I think, and I know that you want to do some more ISAC related sessions, I'd like to have one of our colleagues come back and maybe with an ISAC member come back and just to show how it's working in real time and to what's happening, the member benefit.
Absolutely. I think it would be great as a follow on to this session around ISACs, the history and the benefits of what's out there, to then have a more detailed discussion along with an ISAC that is actually leveraging technology and sees the value in making it collective. So no matter what size the organization, they can collaborate and make their organization safer, but also share information back to the collective. Absolutely. That'd be a great opportunity for us to have a follow-on session with one of your vertical ISACs, and we can what I really like is with technology today and what streaming defense is offering is it's no longer a solo sport in cybersecurity, right? You have a collaborative effort with, like you mentioned, probes, whether they're virtual or physical, sitting on the public side of the enterprise, whether small, medium, or large, sharing information back that's anonymized. So not putting them at risk, but you have now that traffic light methodology as well to share what you feel is critical back to the ISAC. But then also analytics in the future, the more that people participate, you're building, a knowledge base that is when you see one trend. Let's just take healthcare as a vertical. Like if you have members on the healthcare vertical and there's trends, that ISAC can actually then communicate to other members or see if they're seeing similar trends of threats coming in. And I think that piece is going to continue to evolve the more people participate in the ISACs. And it's really a mean of survival, right? And one of the other future conversations, not on today's call, is with AI, machine learning. It's going to be sharing that information and not being isolated on your own is really how you're going to survive, right? Threats are going to come in faster. And the more you can build trends along the data, but in real time, you can protect the collective versus being isolated one by one.
Right. And what we're also seeing too is a lot of these members realize what the value is for the streaming defense component, and they're actually taking it into their own enterprise as an aside, because they truly see that value of visualization of their entire network instantaneously in milliseconds.
That's great. It allows them to push out it also allows them to not take in a lot of noise, right? If it's a known threat. I always think of larger organizations and even outsourced security operations centers. The amount of data coming in is probably overwhelming. So if you have intelligent technology that you have discernment around, you can direct the red to the right critical team member who's evaluating it in the SOC, whether it's in-house or external, and whatever's noise that's known threats, you keep away from the organization. And that's a huge benefit. And I can't even imagine being a SOC engineer today and how stressful that's probably on them with all the data.
Fatigue. Definite fatigue. Yeah. But the good thing too is about the small and medium-sized companies we discussed earlier within the ISACs. They're getting information that's so valuable that they probably wouldn't get otherwise. And the SOC at the ISAC level is sending that information back to them.
Yeah.
So they may not have the resources within their own environment to see these types of threats, but they're getting that actionable data. So it's a win-win all around.
Absolutely. They're probably not participating because they don't know where to go or what resources to leverage. So this gives them the opportunity to be in the game with larger organizations, even if they don't have the same level resource. And it gives them the opportunity to partner up with external providers. Like you said, there's different levels and different ways members could benefit by joining in, for sure.
That's right.
Barrie, thank you so much for joining in today. I really enjoyed this conversation. ISACs were new to me, even though I'm in this space. And I think given the history, some of the challenges of the evolution, whether it's around the data and how it's shared to now real-time millisecond reporting and actionable data that's clear. And then also allowing members who were maybe smaller in size may not have joined because they didn't understand the benefit. And the benefit may not have been there years ago, but the benefit's here today and where they could protect their organizations. So thank you so much for joining in. And we will schedule a follow-on session that goes a little bit more into the technical deep dive along with a vertical ISAC for the next episode. And thank you all for joining in with Cyber Safe with AJ. I hope you enjoyed the conversation today. Please like and subscribe. And I will also provide information for anyone who has questions about streaming defense. So you can go to their website and connect with Barrie. She's on LinkedIn as well. And we really appreciate you for joining in.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.